But speaking of respecting, I actually, like today specifically, might be having the biggest hangover of my existence. I'm not even kidding, like ever. I don't know why. Like we drank some vodka yesterday with some friends of mine. One of them is an actual listener of the podcast, so he might hear this and jizz in his pants. But he sprained his ankle really badly, so he's always just sitting alone all the time. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go visit this guy so he doesn't, get depressed and stuff. And I bought like these 2 bottles from this one specific shop, and I'm pretty sure the booze was fake or something, because when I woke up this morning, I felt as if like the room was closing in on me and expanding at the same time, if that makes any sense. Ooh. And to top that all off, like his friend had brought him like these Dubai cigarettes that literally do not taste like cigarettes at all. They have those balls inside of them that you pop, and it's like smoking a rainbow. So you don't notice just how many fucking cigs you're smoking. So the combination with probably the fake booze and all of this like extremely chemical-induced rainbow cigs led to me being me on this fine day. But when I came home at like 6 a.m., I'm very proud of myself. The first thing I did is like I opened my laptop actually, and I postponed like the 3-4 meetings that I was supposed to have that morning. And when I opened my eyes and it was 11:30 a.m. and I would have had like 3 meetings up until that point, I was like, dude, sometimes you're a smart fucking drunk, not just a
well
dumb
done.
drunk.
All right, I have several questions. Question 1. What is this cigarette you're talking about? There's a ball in the cigarette that pops?
Yeah, inside of the filter, there's two balls. It's called Marlboro Double Fusion Summer. And one of them is, I think, watermelon, and the other one is called the ice ball. So I have no idea what that means. That probably means it's mint.
Yeah.
So you can smoke them like a regular cigarette, or you can pop the 2 balls, and they fill up the sponge of the filter.
Okay,
and
got it.
That changes the taste, and then it tastes like nargileh, shisha, or whatever you want to call it.
Huh. Interesting. Okay, TIL.
Probably kids are the target market,
Of course they are.
That's why in the EU it's bad, that it should be banned, because it does not taste like cigarettes, like zero, like not at all. You're basically vaping a cig, which
we have,
obviously far superior to vaping, but everything is superior to vaping.
The plant-based alternative to vaping, tobacco.
Organic.
We have here these cigarillos that are, bigger than a cigarette, smaller than a cigar, and they're all like very fruitily flavored. But same target markets, like kids, 18-year-olds, stuff like that. Same general idea. Question 2. Was it just you and your friend with 2 bottles of vodka? Because that could explain the hangover. How big are these bottles?
No. They're like one was 0.7, the other one was 1 liter.
Okay.
We had a few beers before that, so 2 liters of alcohol up or down, 1 liter each. After like 5-6 hours, we probably would put most people in the hospital, but like my body is pretty used to that at least once a week. His is as well. Our whole friend group is. So It was extremely surprising to wake up in the state in which I woke up in, and especially because we drank that through a longer period of time. We had food. We made a really nice table and shit, and we even ordered some meat and shit. We had a cigar, like a typical boys' night or whatever.
Yeah,
and
what
I
a
woke
life.
up as if like I went to war against my own body. Which, if Hakeem was here, he would say, yes, you did go to war against your own body. But
he's here in spirit.
The fun is usually worth it, but I have to say this hangover was so bad that arguably was not worth it. The last night was not worth it.
Well, I'm just imagining 2 liters, because here in the States we don't measure things in liters typically, but we do measure those big soda bottles in liters. We've got 2-liter Coke bottles like that they sell at the grocery store, and so that my American mind immediately went okay, how much is 2 liters? And then I imagined that's a lot of alcohol. Props. It sounds like you did everything right, eating food and all that stuff, but good God, that would probably kill me.
Nah, you're being modest. I will teach you one day, my son. You don't rush it. You drink your water. You eat your food, and it can last for basically forever. The only thing that usually gets people is fatigue because they haven't slept enough, and then with the booze you have less control over your motor functions, obviously, and then people start passing out at like house parties, which could be very, very dangerous if you're a young girl, especially. So kids, like, number one, don't drink, but if you drink, actually, know your limit and work on your limit. Serving you instead of potentially causing you irreversible catastrophic damage to your whole life.
I am eagerly awaiting Ugopnik's Skillshare course on how to drink.
I would become a billionaire from that shit. Like, I don't know. I have perfected it as an art form. You know the joke that white people have perfected drinking as an art form. It was a big meme like 2 years ago or whatever. But then Slavs took that and they turned it into a science, my friend.
Yeah, you guys are next level.
Nah, it's you just when you're young you look at how do older people do it, and then you do it in a similar way, and that probably goes back like 3,000 years of like intergenerational genetics and culture of passing on of dealing with life sucking in a particular way. Or alternatively, more of a reason why I sometimes like to drink, making the nice moments even nicer or whatever.
Well, everybody, you heard it here first. Hakeem is not here. Ugopnik and JT both give their stamp of approval to alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of humanity's problems.
Absolutely. Probably we don't even know exactly where the fuck Hakeem is. Probably touching people's balls or drinking the forbidden juice. But he knows that he's gonna have a hangover that's so big because he never drank before that he was like, okay, I need a week off this fucking podcast with these two motherfuckers because they will definitely notice that I am hangover. But not. He is dearly missed, but he deserves a little break. So we will do our best to entertain you without doctor metaphors, which will be massively missed, obviously.
Just imagine a big old pair of balls and one of us touching said balls. There you go. There's your ball anecdote for the week. Enjoy.
Okay, I will do something that you will probably fucking hate me for doing, but I am going to shit myself. Give me literally 3 minutes.
Go on. I'll do the same.
Son of a bitch. Keep this in the podcast.
My fellow Americans, it is with great sadness that I must report that Bofa has collapsed. Many have asked me, what's Bofa? To which I respond, Bofa Deez Towers. I can say with full conviction that these attacks were not bussin' for real. We will find the people responsible for this evil act and bring them to justice. No cap. I couldn't help myself.
You really played the junior in George Bush Jr. Fuck, that was so good. Oh.
Hey, welcome to the Deprogram episode 46, everybody. I hope we didn't start off too heavy or too offensive. If you haven't already determined from the title of the episode and my very bad impression of George W. Bush as a Zoomer, we are talking about 9/11. We just passed the 21st anniversary of the September 11th attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and one field, but we'll get to that. But I wanted to start off by giving a quick disclaimer because it's very hard to cover 9/11 without coming across as either dismissive of the events that kind of precipitated it or callous to the victims and the survivors of the attacks. So let me just get this out of the way real quick. It's important to understand that our coverage of the event might seem a little dismissive or callous, but we have to remember that 9/11 was one of only 2 instances where the American people felt that same fear, anger, and uncertainty that millions around the world feel every single day because of the U.S. So while we can and should feel empathy for those who lost loved ones that day, that empathy must come with the understanding that compared to the sheer scale of atrocities committed by the U.S. war machine and the intelligence community, Pearl Harbor and 9/11 are a drop in the bucket. So that's kind of going to be our perspective for this episode. Yes, it was a horrible tragedy for many of those people involved. Like, my dad was supposed to be in New York that day. We lived in Connecticut at the time, and I'm very thankful that he wasn't there. But we're also going to acknowledge that, the U.S. is not blameless in this kind of situation.
Could not agree more, but the worst... The thing that we will disagree on throughout this whole episode, I can see that you already started fucking it up, respectfully, is that the event is called 11/9,
not
no. 9/11.
Here we
go. It happened on the 11th of fucking September. Okay, not on the September 11th. But we will agree to disagree about this incredibly important ideological topic. But yes, I could not agree more. Well, an undeniably significant moment in history because it happened to the U.S., which at that point in time and up until today is not used to seeing the incredible violence, which is unfortunately very commonplace all over the world, on its own soil, and the reaction which it led to speak volumes about both the character of those attacks and the character of the people that potentially could have stopped them, and the people who reacted after said attacks. So while there should be maximum respect for the victims that endure this, there should be absolute unadulterated judgment towards the pieces of shit dogs that fucking committed this heinous thing. We need to put it in like a dialectical perspective when it comes to seeing just how much, yes, this moment of great grief ended up, unfortunately, leading to far grander levels of grief, where the unfortunate souls that lost their lives on 9/11 ended up being the motivational driver for things that they probably would have absolutely never supported.
Yeah, well said. So let's jump in real quick, and I think for all y'all young whippersnappers in the audience, I think we're going to go over a brief timeline to give you an idea of how things transpired, because it is, it's getting old. It's an old event. I mean, most people, there are plenty of people like around my age that still remember it, but even I was pretty young at that point, so like my siblings have no recollection of 9/11, and that's a little weird to older people. So let's go over the timeline. TLDR, there were 19 hijackers that took control of 4 planes. So let's
19
start.
Iraqis, right? 19 Iraqis, right?
Yeah, clearly.
No, not a single one. Not a single one. Okay, yeah, sorry. I will be interrupting you all the time.
We'll get to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it started around 5:45 a.m. In Portland, Maine. Some of the hijackers passed through security and get on a flight to Boston, where they connect to American Airlines Flight 11. 7:59 a.m., Flight 11 takes off from Boston to Los Angeles. So there are 11 crew members, 76 passengers, and 5 hijackers on board. At 8:15 a.m., shortly after, Flight 175 takes off from Boston to Los Angeles. And one thing you'll notice about these flights is that they're kind of long-haul cross-country flights. The idea was to hijack planes that were loaded down with fuel. So you're looking at like 20,000 gallons, I think, for a cross-country flight. So a lot of jet fuel. Anyway, on Flight 175, there were 9 crew members, 51 passengers, and 5 hijackers. Shortly after, at 8:19, Flight 11 crew members alert ground personnel that a hijacking is underway. Shortly before that happened, one of the hijackers had stabbed a passenger named Daniel Lewin, who was seated in front of him. A lot of people speculate that Lewin may have tried to stop the hijackers, and he was probably the first victim of the attacks. 8:20 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77, en route to Los Angeles, takes off from Washington, D.C., carrying 6 crew members, 53 passengers, and 5 hijackers. At 8:24, 4 minutes later, attempting to communicate with passengers, a hijacker accidentally contacts air traffic control, unwittingly alerting controllers to the attacks. At 8:37, Boston Air Traffic Control alerts the military. Air National Guard jets in Massachusetts are mobilized to follow Flight 11. And this is going to be one of those points where a conspiracy theory comes in, and we will cover those in a little bit once we get done here. We're almost there. At 8:42 a.m., San Francisco-bound United Airlines Flight 93 takes off at Newark following a delay. 7 crew members, 33 passengers, and 4 hijackers are on board. At 8:46 a.m., Flight 11 crashes into floors 93 through 99 of the North Tower, which gives you, a perspective of just how big these planes are. It just carves out 6 floors of a tower. At 8:50, George W. Bush is alerted. And at this point, people were assuming that this was a tragic accident. At 8:55, the South Tower is declared secure. At 8:59, Port Authority police order the evacuation of both towers. A minute later, the order is expanded to the entire World Trade Center complex, which includes a smaller building a little ways off, which also collapsed, which some people are very suspicious about. That's another conspiracy theory that we might touch on. At 9 a.m., a flight attendant aboard Flight 175 alerts air traffic control that hijacking is underway. 3 minutes later, Flight 175 crashes into floors 77 through 85 of the South Tower. So now both towers have been hit by an airliner. 2 minutes later, at 9:05 a.m., President Bush learns that the second plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. 25 minutes later, he will give his address, not the one that I gave, but similar enough, to the American people, saying that terrorism against our nation will not stand. That same moment, 9:05 a.m., Flight 77 passenger Barbara Olson calls her husband, who is the U.S. Solicitor General, who alerts other federal officials of the hijacking. After this, VP Dick Cheney is evacuated to the Presidential Emergency Operations Center beneath the White House. They don't want, if the White House is struck, they don't want both Bush and Cheney to go, so they take him away. 9:37 a.m., Flight 77 crashes into the Pentagon. This crash and the fire kill 59 on the plane and 125 on the ground. The Pentagon is located in Arlington, Virginia, a short distance from Washington, D.C., and it's kind of the nerve center of the American military and defense operations. After that, the FAA decides to ground all flights, and the White House and the U.S. Capitol are evacuated by 9:45 a.m. At 9:59, the South Tower collapses after burning for 56 minutes. More than 800 people in and around the building are killed. Finally, at 10:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 93 crashes near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, after passengers and crew storm the cockpit. 40 passengers and crew on board perish, along with the hijackers. So that was the last one. That Flight 93 was apparently intended for either the Capitol building or the White House. But since that flight was delayed, passengers on board were able to get phone calls from loved ones alerting them that there were hijackings going on. And at this point, they were able to determine that their plane was also being hijacked. And there are some recordings of the passengers making phone calls to loved ones and letting them know what's going on, that they're going to storm the cockpit and try to gain control from the hijackers. A lot of people, there's some uncertainty, but it seems to be a consensus that they at least kind of breached the cockpit. But regardless, plane flipped over and basically nosedived into the ground at 500 miles an hour.
It was a lose-lose because the pilot was one of the terrorists. So even if you get in, you would have to somehow convince him to fly it back to safety, which they at that moment understood would not really be a possibility. I mean, they knew the hijacking was going on, but the main reason why there was not an upheaval up to that point, at least not one of that scale, was because all the hijackings of planes, which were relatively common since like the 50s, would lead to, ransoms, etc., etc. So there was not a lot of logic in fighting these people, because these people wanted to get something from the government, and then they would let the passengers go, etc., etc. But this was the first time, literally, when it comes to terrorist acts, that a plane was used as a missile, right? And when they talked to their loved ones and they realized that this is connected to the other planes that are literally nosediving into motherfucking buildings, they understood that, okay, like literally, even if I get stabbed or killed, etc., I'm in a lose-lose situation here. Unfortunately, they were in a lose-lose-lose situation. Even if they would be able to get in the cockpit, I doubt they would be able to convince the pilot, or I doubt there was an additional pilot on the plane that could have driven it. So it's flown it. So it's, I don't know how I would have reacted in that particular moment, but I think I don't ever want to actually question.
Yeah, I mean, but if Mark Wahlberg had been on the plane, it would have gone down
We'd
differently, as we know. But yeah, that's a brief kind of overview of how the events of that day unfolded. It was over in about 5 hours from the moment the hijackers went through security to when all planes had crashed. But it was a very intense, very confusing period for everyone involved, because it at first it seemed like, oh, it's an accident, okay, and then there's the second one that hits, and then people are like, okay, there's something going on now. And this was back before smartphones were really a thing, so a lot of people just weren't able to communicate with their loved ones who were in the city and stuff like that, and it was pretty scary. Like, Gopnik, do you remember where you were? I know it's different, like, because you didn't live in the country, but I'm sure you saw it on TV.
Oh, yeah. Everybody, like the whole household, was sitting around a tiny television set looking at the events transcribing. And I remember some people were partying, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Which, sounds like dark humor, but when relatively similar things have happened to you and then you see it happen on the quote-unquote soil of the enemy or whatever, the emotional reaction is very different. I remember specifically that more than a few people went out on their balconies and shot guns, and some people like played loud music, etc., and started smaller parties. It's talking about it now sounds tasteless, but respectfully, if you were in their shoes,
considering what you just that region had just been through, thanks to the United States,
thanks to our own bullshit, but also the United States, absolutely. But it was such a different time. I would say you probably remember, but you don't, and I don't as well. Kind of giving out our age here, but I found it mind-numbing that even one airport security expert that I can quote said, after it happened, after they used the planes to, as missiles, as I said previously, we were like, why has nobody done this before? Like, this is actually, in a very dark, fucked up way, absolutely motherfucking brilliant. And what's even funnier is that, obviously, there was a time before the TSA existed. You could get on a plane 5 minutes before liftoff. It was the airport experience was like 100%. Nothing like what it is now, where you have to go like an hour and a half in advance and take your shoes off, take your clothes off, etc., get everything scanned, blah, blah, blah. And one small, minute detail, but one that I find extremely interesting, just as a contrast of how differently we organize our traffic security now, air traffic security, is that even if the TSA of that time, which didn't exist, it was all private contractors, which again, markets work better than government institutions, but let's not even get started on that. Even if they found the knives that most of the hijackers were using, they would have returned them to them because they were legal sized, quite literally. To me, that is absolutely mind-blowing. And most likely the reason why they went with those specific knives, because they knew they were going to let them in. It was too much of a risk to bring firearms, and obviously we know what a firearm on a plane can do, etc., etc. They needed better crowd control, and a lot of the ones recruited, except for the pilot, were literally recruited specifically because for this specific mission, because they were quote unquote muscle that actually knew how to pacify a person physically without the use of a firearm, which is another extremely interesting fact, that the muscle, these poor motherfucking idiots, didn't even know that the mission is a suicide mission, most likely, up until literally the end. It was an executive decision by the CEO of Al-Qaeda to literally not tell them. The pilots knew, motherfuckers, we be doing the dying today, but the muscle didn't. So there was probably a big, information dump in the last 15-20 minutes. They're like, okay, dude, why haven't we landed yet? Like, what the fuck is going on? He's like, oh yeah, we're about to land in that motherfucking building right there. Probably kind of an awkward silence between them, but they were probably their belief in the cause was probably strong enough to say, okay, YOLO, fuck it, man.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get me some versions, baby.
Yeah. And these were, a lot of them were very young people. Like, they were some 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, which is, I mean, you get it because, you know, you think of the young men as typically being the most gung-ho for action, stuff like that, so you understand. But also, like, all those years they're throwing away on this kind of suicide mission. It's foreign to me, that kind of thing. But yeah, I remember I was in school at the time, and my classroom was one of very few where the teacher didn't bring in a TV and like have the TV on and be watching it with the class. So we had no idea what was going on. I'm sure the teacher did, but she had stopped teaching at one point. It was just kind of, she, you know, went out to the hallway a couple times, had some conversations, and we were just kind of sitting there doing busy work. And one by one, my classmates were getting called to the principal's office. Like, oh, hey, Tom, your mom's here. I'm like, okay. And then there were like just a couple of us left. And then finally, my name got called, and I still had no idea what was going on. So I went out, and my mother picked me up. Took
like,
me
day
home.
off school, motherfuckers, yeah.
Yeah, I was stoked at the time. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I get to go home early, because it was still, you know, very early in the morning at that point. So eventually she kind of, my parents always sheltered us a little bit, so she didn't explain exactly what was going on, just that there had been a big accident or something, and that's, you know, my dad was supposed to be in the area, so they're just making sure we're all safe and stuff like that. But yeah, it wasn't until a little bit later in the day when my parents had the TV on after my dad had gotten home that it became apparent what was going on, you know, to the extent that it was apparent to anybody reporting on it at the time. But yeah, I'm, you know, probably the last age, around the last age that's remembers 9/11, because I barely, you know, remember the finer details. I was pretty young.
It's almost like the meme, Joe Biden, wake up, 9/11. You're one of the rare ones who is still Joe Biden, remember 9/11ing. But it must be a strange thing to experience, especially on your own soil when you're not used to anything like that ever happening. But it also, now I'm gonna like say a cliche thing, but it's, I think if we don't say it at least once throughout this whole episode, it would be a relative waste, which is when something like that massive but also explosive, quite literally, happens, and 3,000 people lose their lives. Everybody loses their shit. Teachers start bringing in TVs into the classroom. Fucking parents start picking their kids up. Everybody's terrified of if maybe someone would have died over there. But in peak COVID, we had almost double that number dying in the US on a daily basis. And people were doing the opposite. They wanted to shove their kids into schools and into malls and into very tall buildings without any protection, etc., which I'm not making the argument, why do you care about this thing and you don't care about that thing? I think that's for petty liberal moralist idiots. What I'm saying is that you should just be conscious of the fact that most of the most horrific suffering which is going on in the background daily. It's a part of the status quo. It is not something that causes shock. That is why a lot of people in like our sphere that literally on a daily basis go through all the horrors, like read through all the horrors that are happening worldwide. That's why we kind of get relatively triggered, if I can call it that, when a certain tragedy becomes trendy, if I can call it that. Then absolutely everybody's talking about it. But for the last fucking 20 years, they didn't give a fuck about similar things happening domestically, just not as in a bombastic fashion as, for example, literal buildings blowing up, or let me not even get started, abroad. Just the trendiness of certain catastrophes versus others is, not extremely important of a topic, but something you should keep in mind. Because when we're only talking about the bombastic catastrophes, we tend to forget the fact that massive catastrophes are happening on a daily. It gives you a false sense of comfort. The U.S. literally, when it comes to counting lives, had, fucking 500 9/11s in the previous 3 years. So you were not comfortable. You were losing loved ones, and it was a very fucked up situation. But, the building doesn't have to blow up for you to understand that the status quo is super fucked up.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about that the other day, where 9/11 didn't really feel like 9/11 this year, because in the past you've always had a bunch of memes, like really, funny, insensitive memes about the events and stuff like that, and it wasn't really that way this year. And I think part of it is, like you said, with the COVID. It seems less severe, less tragic now that we've been so desensitized to, a 9/11's worth of deaths every single day for 2 years. I mean, we're still at, about 3,000 deaths a week in the United States, which is just wild. But yeah, I mean, it could also be that we're over the hill at this point. There are no more people under a certain age, I don't know, probably 26, 27, who remember 9/11. So, it may just be one of those things where it's like, oh, you young whippersnappers don't remember the defining moment of our generation. So Who knows? It's just something. It's weird watching an event that you lived through that was so world changing kind of become history. Less of a current event.
Welcome to having a midlife crisis, my friend. This is literally called getting old. It's going to keep getting weirder, my friend. I think, especially the things that we care about super dearly are just going to be a meme to some kids in fucking 20 years, which I guess it's a part of life. But what you actually mentioned is extremely important on another front, which is we tend to forget that 9/11 came as... Sorry, every time I say 9/11, I just want to say Joe Biden, wake up. I can't help myself. So 9/11, Joe Biden, wake up. Came at just the right moment for the U.S. State Department after the Cold War had ended, and the search for the eternal enemy against whom we must all struggle against no longer was communism, because communism from their eyes was quote unquote dead, and 9/11 obviously, as everybody listening to this knows, offered a perfect hook to transforming the Muslim world into the new communism. But what you mentioned about everybody starting to forget the pain and suffering of 9/11 because quite literally 20 years have passed might insinuate that the State Department is going to start looking for another big bad enemy. And that is going to be very interesting to witness. But hopefully the American people have learned from their past mistakes of demonizing one ethnicity, or in this case religious group, for the actions of people who arguably weren't even that fucking religious in the first place. But you get my fucking point.
Yeah, it's one of those things where people look back and say, "Oh, this event brought the United States together. It brought, the starkly divided population unite. It made them united on this one thing, defense of the country and stuff like that." Which is not really all that true. Like, sure, George Bush's popularity went up, but it did not unite the country. It did not unite everybody in the country, I should say. Because like with COVID, where we saw a sharp increase in anti-Asian violence, we saw a tremendous increase after 9/11.
Virus.
Exactly, yeah. In anti-Arab violence or anti-Muslim violence. Anybody who looked like they could be from, as the United States says, Agrabah or something like that, where Aladdin lives.
What was the racist term? Come on, educate me. Oh, no, you can't say it. So I'll say it because I'm from the buckets. Towel head. That was a big thing. Towel head. It's so unoriginal. I mean, come on. You wear hats
others.
too. Yeah.
There are some nasty ones, but
there are some pretty bad ones.
But I mean that's what
I was
happens.
super shocked when it comes to. Sorry for interrupting you again. Trying to lighten the load as much as I possibly can. Apologies. I was super surprised just how high level certain racist terms can go. And I think I was 19 or 20, and an American told me that you can just use the N-word, and then in front of the N-word,
Yep.
like a geographical area.
A modifier,
yeah. So sand, for example, because they're from the desert. And like I was like, who the fuck thinks up this shit? Like you people are fucking weird, man. but yeah. Like there's literal slur science, slur linguistics, baby. Slur linguistics for the Slur Olympics. Sorry, please go on. Apologies.
Yeah. No, I mean it's like what you were saying with, hoping Americans have learned their lesson. Unfortunately, we have not, because we saw it with COVID, and we're seeing it again with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. You see, like, even institutions now saying, no Russians allowed. We need to, if there's a Russian tennis player, they need to, publicly denounce Vladimir Putin and the evil actions of Russia. It's
Super
like, man,
fucked up.
it's like just these are normal people. These are not your enemy. Like you're buying this bloodlust that is being peddled to you, regardless of what the justifications are or whether you think it's valid or not for the country itself to be a target. And, with 9/11, there was really, no specific country justification. It was just, these brown people over here, this religion over here. We haven't learned a thing, because every single time, there's a scaremongering in the news about, the China virus. Okay, suddenly all Asian people are the enemy. They must be pushed out. They must be beaten down, all this stuff. And it's going to be the same every single time this comes up. And I hope people will learn from history, because we've had a few back-to-back now. But somehow I don't think we're going to.
And in my opinion, it's a very specific American thing, because if we're not talking about, state versus state, and then, for example, I don't know, Slovakia is fighting the Czech Republic, and then, all the Slovaks hate all the Czechs, and all the Czechs hate all the Slovaks, etc., etc. That happens with every nation. But if, for example, like 20 Slovaks go into the Czech Republic and they blow up a building, it's not immediately going to, people are not immediately going to jump to conclusions that all the Czechs that live in Slovakia indirectly are in support of this terrorist action, and then they will not apply that to that specific ethnicity or cultural group that lives over where they do. But then again, the U.S. is arguably the most international place on planet Earth, so there's more than enough already predefined bigotry that gets lit easily by contemporary events that are committed by one group or another. And I share your skepticism strongly, because, for example, everybody was against the travel ban for Muslims back when Trump was putting it in place, and that is absolutely great that people were. But finally, you learned your lessons that not Muslims aren't bad people. Just took you 20 years. But when it comes to, for example, suggestions about the travel bans all over the EU and in the US for Russian citizens, it's like discussed like fucking, oh, absolutely, man, that absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
It's absolutely legitimate. What the fuck? But play it out in your mind. Banning all citizens of, for example, Syria from coming into the country, it's going to feel racist and bigoted. Yeah, then apply that to every single ethnicity out there, because it would be bigoted, and it would be punishment of the whole population due to for the actions of a few. And I think we as a society, Joker face, have grown out of that approach to international politics.
Yeah. All right, well, we've done all the serious stuff now, and well, there's more to be said, but there always is. Let's have a little bit more fun. You can't talk about 9/11 without discussing some of the conspiracy theories that surround the event, because there are a lot of them. So I wrote down just a few of the more common ones that we can touch on real quick. You've probably heard some of these before, so I'm going to start with the classic. Jet fuel can't melt steel beams. This is
melty melt.
That's the original, Bush did 9/11, et cetera, et cetera. And there are many proposed reasons for the Bush admin to stage the event themselves. But one of the main claims is that the towers were brought down in a controlled demolition by explosives planted inside the buildings rather than by the impact of the planes and the subsequent fires. So one proposed justification for this particular theory is that the fuel contained within the planes would not have burned hot enough to melt the structural steel beams in the towers and cause a collapse. Now, think of that what you will. Scientifically speaking, kerosene does burn hotter than the melting point of structural steel, about 500 degrees Celsius hotter. So personally, I wouldn't put much stock in this particular claim, even though, it's the famous one, the one you hear all the time when talking about 9/11 truthers and stuff like that. So personally, I don't think this one holds much water.
Absolutely. It makes no sense. I mean, it does melt steel beams, so shut the fuck up. Which reminds me of, how people say blood is thicker than water. It's not.
Yeah.
It's literally not. So here it's literally will not melt it. But, things just catch on, and that specific one is very easy to explain to people, very easy to hook them. So I think that's why it's arguably the most popular one.
Yeah.
Well, equally being the dumbest one.
And these are all like, you hear them, you're like, oh, well, maybe that's valid. If you don't take the time to just look into it a little bit yourself, then it can be very easy to slip into one of these theories and assume that it's correct just because a lot of people are saying it and it sounds right. And you're like, oh, these people have clearly done their research. But yeah, that one, not so much. Now, let's check out another one. The Air Force stand down theory. The question here is, why didn't fighter jets intercept the planes? According to proponents of this claim, NORAD officially ordered the Air Force to stand down, or they purposefully alerted the Air Force late in order to give the hijackers time to hit their targets. So the TLDR for this one is that several of the hijackers were trained pilots, and they simply turned off the plane's transponders. And that makes them very difficult or virtually impossible to track among the considerable amount of national air traffic. So officials also state that intercepting a commercial plane takes longer than it does in the movies. The last time it was done, in 1979, it took 1 hour and 19 minutes before they were able to successfully intercept and lead the plane down. NORAD was only alerted of the hijacking about 8 minutes before impact, if you remember from the timeline at the beginning of the episode. So yeah, this one, while it seems more legit right off the bat than the jet fuel one, it also, to me, doesn't really stand up to much scrutiny because they simply didn't have the time. This was pre 9/11. This 9/11 was the event that made these protocols for having jets ready to scramble at any time become a thing. Before then, it was fairly lax. Like, air travel was fairly relaxed, and the requirements to get through security, like Ugopnik was saying, fairly easy. So we weren't expecting a plane to fly into a building, a passenger plane to fly into a building, let alone, multiple of them. So yeah, that's another one that, to me, doesn't really hold much water.
I mean, today, even ignore how the state would react and how quickly it would react. Just the number of fucking basement dwellers that keep looking at those websites of where a plane is going and where it's not would fucking notice an irregularity fucking immediately. Also, I guess, thanks to 9/11, I know it sounds fucked up, we now know that the Kardashians fly more than half of the fucking country combined. And other beautiful information because of the said transparency. I mean, even the Nancy Pelosi flight towards Taiwan was watched in real time as if it's a film. So those websites are always extremely interesting to me. And I know you have more theories, but you're giving some that are very legit. I want to just give one that is super wonky.
Yeah, let's hear it.
That I remember, that was actually the first one that I ever heard, which is that it's actually all orchestrated by the Jews, those motherfuckers, because not a single Jew died during 9/11. And when somebody drops such a massive info bomb on you, you're like, this has to be true, man. Nobody would lie this hard. If there's 0 Jews that died, it must be true because it's such a fist on the table type of piece of information. But then you actually Google it and it's absolutely incorrect. Actually, over 9.7% of 9.2% of the people that died during 9/11 happened to be Jewish. So it's absolute bullshit. But I love how we can always squeeze the Jew in somewhere. And they even like were like, okay, the Muslim motherfuckers, I hate those motherfuckers, but I don't hate them as much as I hate the Jew motherfuckers. I gotta add the Jew somehow. In
they
the
fit
whole,
in here somewhere.
Yeah, they have to fit in here somewhere. But yeah, I remember I believed this theory for like 10 minutes because I was not believe the theory. I was like, oh my god, Jews are really lucky motherfuckers. Like not a single one of them died. But obviously then I googled it and I remember it was like 15. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Uncle or some old guy that probably told me that shit. But yeah. That's the small little interjection I wanted to have. Please proceed.
Yeah, that's one of those where it's like, there has to be some element of Jewish conspiracy. And in every conspiracy there is, or, most conspiracies, there's some flavor of Jewish meddling, which is a good way, I think, to kind of weed out the, patently absurd ones, which are, clearly just based in, like, race baiting and stuff like that. But let's move on to one that I think is the most plausible of the bunch. Like, if you wanted to believe one, this might be your option. And that is insider trading. The short version of this one is that there was a tremendous amount of suspicious stock market activity surrounding American Airlines and United Airlines. They're the two companies from which the planes were hijacked, as well as insurance companies.
Original names.
Yeah, exactly. Insurance companies, Citigroup, which handled a great deal of travelers' insurance, Morgan Stanley, which occupied 22 floors of the World Trade Center, and Raytheon, which stood to benefit from U.S. response to the attacks. So a handful of groups, including the FBI and the Securities and Exchange Commission, investigated these anomalies and determined that they were all fairly innocent. They all had innocuous explanations. So, make of that what you will. The U.S. intelligence agencies investigating themselves and finding they did nothing wrong, as usual. I won't go so far as to say that I believe this because I don't know. I really don't. I haven't looked into it enough. It is very, very suspicious, like the amount of stock market activity around these things that were affected by 9/11. But I am not an expert in this, and I don't typically like to subscribe to, it sounds almost rude to call them conspiracy theories, but some of them are. And it's hard to determine where the truth falls among these very, very different explanations or reasonings for the same event. So it's the type of thing where, we'll probably never get all the details. Did the U.S. do it themselves? Probably not. Did they let it happen? Maybe. Did it benefit them in the end? Yeah, I'd say so. So it's one of those events where it's just such a world-changing thing that it's never going to be declassified. Whatever information we don't know, we're going to continue to not know it, in my opinion.
Exactly. And the only moment when it might be declassified, same like your files, is when nobody cares or gives a fuck about it anymore. But when it comes to the insider trading thing, like, I believe a person has to be relatively naive to think that when some of the first executive staff and non-executive staff in the White House realized what the fuck is about to fucking go down and what is going down, and that it's not accidents, etc., I think you would be naive not to think that they pulled out a phone and called their fucking stockbroker and moved things around a bit before the rest of the market actually got a moment to react. A lot of people made a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
That specific day.
I mean, that's what happens in positions of power, and especially in places like the U.S. where, you've got Nancy Pelosi trading a bunch of stock in semiconductors and stuff like that before her Taiwan visit, and all these things where they have insider information and they act on it because they're allowed to, because they make the rules. So, yeah, make of that what you will. I think, following the money is always the easiest way to determine what's going on when something looks fishy. But, you can come to your own conclusions about 9/11. I don't know.
Yeah, and anybody who claims they know 100% everything that has happened are probably bullshitting you massively. But the general story is there. It has been proven, and it is
Yeah.
something in which we can believe. Especially, I remember in my younger days, I dedicated quite a lot of time to learn as much as I potentially can about the hijackers themselves, and if the planes were used by the group of people that later claimed themselves that they have used it, and everything pretty much comes to a full circle. This was a horrible but brilliantly planned operation that I wouldn't even, honestly, I don't know why I called it brilliant, because it's extremely obvious operation that they just thought of at the time when they did. Sometimes I like to play these fucked up games in my brain when I see a large gathering of people with absolutely no security, and I tell myself, okay, this is exactly what the fuck I would blow up if that was my approach at how to I spread my ideology 1, 2, or 3. But 9/11 in particular is just a case study on how to do it properly, but one could say that it backfired massively, and that is the problem with terrorism in general, and that is why, for example, Marxists should absolutely fucking stay the fuck away from it.
Yeah.
Not for any ethical reasons, but because it literally doesn't fucking work. And, for example, 9/11 hijacking and all the other countless acts of terrorism by groups that pretend that they represent Islam, but they're just fucking dumbass gangster thugs that want to find an ideology that melts their brain enough, have led quite literally to the destruction of almost all of these cells, almost all of these organizations, to the total and utter rejection of these organizations by the Muslim world, by the Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, etc. world. They have quite literally shot themselves in the foot with every bullet which they shot at someone else. No matter how dissuaded you feel how offended you feel by the actions of a particular state, a particular class, etc., or a particular ideology, the solution is absolutely never taking that out on everyday individuals which are not a part of the executive branch of whatever move is being committed. So the big L, the other week we talked about assassinations in particular, when Gavrilo Princip shot the Archduke, etc.
Yeah.
Well, right after World War I, indirectly, this assassination of an executive individual, funny enough, obviously because of other reasons as well, but funny enough, led to a mini Yugoslavia at that time called Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. But even the largest project of modern so-called Islamic terrorism through the lens of, for example, ISIS or ISIL, etc. They changed their name 700 times. Decide on your fucking branding. Their video editors, super high-end motherfuckers. But when it comes to whoever did the branding, you should have been fired a long time ago. But that project also backfired massively and just led to the complete annihilation of their organization. So TLDR, terrorism bad, makes no fucking sense. You're a dumb cretin.
Yes, and the most important thing that I can't believe we haven't mentioned yet about this is that all Queen Elizabeth had to do is wait 3 more days to kick the bucket to make the funniest day in internet history, at least since Big Boat stuck. I can't believe she would be such a coward to go out on the 8th instead of the 11th. Just incredibly disappointing. Worst day of the year.
Absolutely, that was my first fucking I'm browsing Instagram, and some imbeciles that live in the fucking Balkans are posting pictures of Queen Elizabeth with a broken heart emoji, fucking dogs, fuck off. But I realized she was dead, and it just popped up in my mind. Oh my god, is it 9/11 today. This just fucking happened on 9/11. Like the Brits and the Yanks are going to be fighting over who gets that specific day for fucking centuries, I think. But nah. She like, come on, England, can't you get better doctors? I'm sure they could have kept her alive for a few more days, man. Okay, that's a bit dark, but yeah. But that's an interview with some rocker guy, like a rock musician, I don't fucking know. And they're talking about the Queen or something, and they asked him, what do you think about the royal family? And he just like, without blinking, he said, she's going to die on the 7th. And she died on the 8th, right? But she probably died on the 7th. She died probably on the 7th, but they didn't tell us all the way up until the 8th. So this rocker guy, I'm going to have to Google him later, somebody to pay attention to, because motherfucker knows when motherfuckers die.
Yeah, there was a tweet that somebody posted like towards the beginning of the year. It's like, I'm going to, I probably won't want to say the word. I'm going to blank the Queen of England on September 8th, 2022. And they quote tweeted themselves like, please, FBI, do not, I had nothing to do with this. So, I can't imagine what that was like, waking up and seeing that, like, oh God, oh no.
Then remembering that tweet that you made fucking 7 months ago and shitting your fucking breeches if he's a Brit. In his little flat. Oh boy, fucking Queen died in it. But,
old Burr's pissed it, right? She's dead. She's fucking kicked it, right? What happened to empathy?
Empathy. What was it that the Irish are singing now?
Lizzy's in a box.
Lizzy's in a box. Lizzy's in a box. They go hard. Those motherfuckers. They go hard. Same like Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead for Margaret Thatcher. That obviously like. The capitalist sect of feminism immediately was like, why are you calling her a witch? Is it because she's a woman? That's what you hate about her, right? Yeah, that's exactly. I wake up and I hate Maggie Thatcher and fucking Lizzy in a box because they're women. Eat my dick.
Yeah, well, eat whatever part of my anatomy you feel like eating.
Yes, exactly. Or none if you don't feel like eating it. Yes. Because now it's going to sound like I'm forcing you to eat something. Yeah. But no, I can't believe we haven't mentioned Lizzy, actually. It kind of shows how relevant the death was for like maybe 3-4 days. But it was incredible to me to see like even young people on the streets of England during England's 9/11 like actually being sad about this like institution that I'm not saying throw a party. I'm kind of saying throw a party, but you should. But like being openly sad is such a nerdy fucking thing to do about a monarch. You fucking nerd. And then on top of that, seeing motherfucking cucks like Ben Shapiro or Tucker Carlson talk about a British monarch in a positive light. Are you supposed to be American nationalists? What the fuck happened to the American right wing, man? It's like literally your country wouldn't exist if you didn't kick their fucking asses out of fucking that part of North America. And now, like, I'm listening to Tucker Carlson talking about the British Empire as if, it's given more good shit to the world than bad. Like, British Empire, like literally the number one state that you as an American should despise because your whole fucking history is based on seceding from that particular empire. It's like me talking good shit about the Ottomans, even though they had great shit and stuff and they did some amazing shit or whatever. Fuck the motherfucking Ottomans because they fucking raped and butchered us for a bunch of years. Like no Serb or Croat or Bosnian or Montenegrin would ever or Greek, oh Jesus Christ, would think about saying something good about the Ottomans because literally our countries wouldn't exist without the Ottoman myth. Same about the US without the without the British Empire fighting back myth. It's I don't know, whoever's writing the script, probably somebody Jewish, if we look at the conspiracies, is really off the mark with being said for good old Lizzy.
Yeah, all I'm gonna say is that we're putting our flags at half-mast for a British monarch. We should be putting those things at double-mast. That's what I'm saying. They should be hovering above the mast for when a British monarch dies.
The mast should be very stiff and upright whenever a monarch dies.
Yeah. All right. Oh, man, there's so much to talk about, dear listener, with 9/11. We've barely scratched the surface. There's the forgetting of the 9/11 first responders. They were symbols of bravery and all that stuff, and they got applause and all this. And then they were cast aside when they all got cancer and various diseases from inhaling all the garbage at the ground zero. So instead of the U.S. treating them, Michael Moore, the filmmaker, took them to Cuba, and they got free Cuban healthcare, and which is just the perfect encapsulation of what the United States is. It will gladly turn you into a symbol of American pride and then cast you aside when it's no longer convenient for them. The same thing happened with essential workers during COVID. Like they got applause. You know, the British did donuts. They did donuts with the boat. I think that was the British for the essential workers, and they didn't give them a pay raise. They didn't give them hazard pay. They didn't take care of their own health. Like they didn't provide sufficient personal protective equipment. They got applause for a few days, and then they were left to die on the front lines when they caught COVID because they had to, make Starbucks drinks for entitled people who would come in and cough all over them all day. So that to me, that's what the United States is. Every time there's a tragedy, it will turn the people of the United States into a symbol, and then it will ignore the actual people. It will use the symbol and ignore the actual human beings.